Hey guys, so with the ban list recently announced, I thought I'd do a survey and gather your thoughts on the ban list and the best decks for next format. So before I continue, a big thanks to my sponsors as usual. So we had 270 players respond to this survey, so big thanks to all of you that took time to do this. Now admittedly, I did have to make this survey hastily so that there would be enough time for you all to respond and for me to analyze the data and make a video on it. But I definitely appreciated your feedback on how to improve the survey, so I will make changes for the future. Now moving forward, hopefully we can get more responses, so make sure to follow me on Twitter to not miss out on any potential Yu-Gi-Oh related surveys. Alright, I'm also on Instagram now too if you want to follow me. As a brief overview on the competitiveness of the players that responded, basically about 80% of the respondents were either competitive or semi-competitive players, meaning that they actually do attend in-person events regularly, even if it's just locals. Had about 21% that considered themselves as casual players, who would be more so players that only play online or play with their friends. In terms of overall satisfaction level of this new ban list, over half were dissatisfied or very dissatisfied of the list, and I don't think that's too surprising considering that they still did not end up banning Mystic Mine. Now granted, I think if I were to ask this question after every ban list, knowing Yu-Gi-Oh players, we probably will never be too satisfied with any ban list, but I think this one did sting in particular with so many players clamoring for Mine to get banned and Konami just did not listen to the players yet again. As for the timing of the list, again, not too surprisingly, the vast majority felt that the list should have come out sooner, particularly considering that the wait for this ban list was the longest in the last 5 years or so. So now on to the newly banned cards. I asked which one that you were most satisfied with, and looks like the clear number one was Fairy Tail Snow at almost half the responses. Definitely not sure why this even came off the list in the first place, but that definitely did not last very long. Hawk was second at 28%, and I think we really saw this coming for this list. Now if we go with which card you were most surprised that it got banned, then Ronin Totem and Red Reboot were essentially tied for first place. The Ronin Totem ban was really surprising because I didn't think they would hit Sprite so soon, and while it's not a direct Sprite card, it basically is. I had a feeling that Red Reboot would get banned at some point, although I'm surprised that it's happened already, and I am also surprised that they didn't make any further hits to other powerhouse traps like D-Barrier to accommodate for this change. Now if you could put one additional card on the forbidden section, no surprise, for those that answer this optional question, the majority put Mystic Mine, something we've been calling for a while, especially after this card was single-handedly taking vents. I really don't know why Konami loves this card so much to not even put any form of hit to it all this time. Some other potential bans include Curious, which somehow survived, and we are still going to have to deal with the Eradicator Epidemic virus line. Call by the Grave is sort of the same category as Red Reboot in that people debate whether it should come to 3 or just straight up get banned. Scythe interestingly dodges the ban list yet again, although it was not played that much the past format, although some new Sprite plays do involve Diviner and Scythe. As for new cards to put on the limited section, looks like players were most satisfied with the Spellbook of Judgment release, which I know many predicted this would happen. I never played while this card was previously legal, but curious to see what kind of plays this card will enable again. A Pointer was second, and I suppose that it is nice to see now that Red Reboot is banned, but they really should have hit more traps on this list as well. The Cyberjar limit was really interesting and cool to see some old cards peel off the list since they're not going to do anything. In terms of the newly limited card that players were most surprised with, this goes to Substitoad, which I suppose with the Ronin Totem ban, this shouldn't serve as an issue. I know it was an enabler of FTKs back in the day, which is never fun. Now people are satisfied and yet also surprised by the Appointer limit, and to be honest with you, even if Red Reboot didn't get banned, this card was worthy of getting a consistency slap. In terms of other limited cards that players would have wanted to see, again we see Mystic Mine top the list. Super Poly was a close second, and this is something I was hoping would happen to curve tier limits since they weren't touched too much on this list. Obviously people are still hoping for the releases of Harp Horror and Electromite, although I personally have lost hope at this point. There are a bunch of other cards that people suggested on this section where on their own didn't add up too much, and some of the suggestions included cards like Dimension Shifter and Kit Callus. Now admittedly, I should have done something for semi-limited cards as well, even though we didn't have any newly semi-limited cards, so I will add that in for next time. As for the newly unlimited cards, looks like most people were most satisfied with Nadir's Servant, which I felt the same way since I also played Dogmatica Invoked. Wasn't that long ago where this was semi-limited, but honestly decks that utilize this engine weren't doing too much the last couple of formats, so I think this is fine to come back. The Maximus and Schism line for Winda isn't as strong as it once was anyways. Fusion Destiny coming back was also very satisfying for a lot of players, which I'm sure are mostly hero players, and it's also good to see Late Stage come back after being hit due to Orcus combos. As for the newly unlimited card that people were most surprised with, this by far was Ben 10. I'm surprised myself that Konami brought back Ben 10 so soon, and while Drytron players are rejoicing, I have to admit that this is not a strategy that I enjoy going up against. I guess there were also some players surprised of the Fusion Destiny Unlimited as well, but since the ban of Anaconda and no one was playing the DPE package with Fusion Destiny at just 2, aside from Heroes that is, I guess Konami felt it was safe for this to come back. As for the one card that you could suggest for it to become unlimited, the most common response was Pot of Desires, which initially got that random limit a couple lists ago and is now still at 2. I think it can come back to 3, especially when Prosperity is still at 3, although I get it, that's a more newer card. Tenki is another card that people want back to 3, especially considering that Dryden is still banned and Tri-Brigade is not at the power level it once was, despite some new bonuses thanks to Sprite. People really want Salah back at full power as well, and that Circle release didn't seem to break the deck anyway, so maybe something to consider. Servant of Endymion was an interesting choice as well, considering that Pendulums are not doing anything. I think it's definitely safe for this card to come back as well. Now, as for what players think is the best deck for the next format, take a wild guess. It is Tier Limits at a whopping 94%. I think it's a very clear choice, especially after this ban list where they did not take a major hit, and they also have the Ishizu cards coming very soon in Darkwing Blast, which will really cement this deck as a top strategy. Sprite and Mathmech are probably the next best options, with some love for Exo Sisters and Flunder as well. As for what players felt is the most overrated deck for the next format, we have Exo Sisters taking the top spot. It did win YCS Niagara with a big thanks to D-Shifter, but looks like not a lot of players have hope for it. A quarter of the respondents felt Sprite was overrated, while Rika was another option that players think is overhyped. Perhaps this strategy has died down a bit ever since its Yours win. As for the most underrated decks, Branded Despia came as the first choice. Once a tier 1 deck after the release of Albus Strike, this deck has quickly taken the backseat after Power the Elements with Tier Elements and Sprite in the mix. Flunder is still a strong option in this meta as well, and oddly enough, a good amount felt Exo Sisters were underrated as well, while most were thinking that they were overrated. Sword Soul is another deck worth mentioning considering that they were the clear tier 1 strategy not that long ago, so don't sleep on them just yet either. Lastly, I asked which YouTubers were your favorite for banlist reactions. Now keep in mind that the responses for this probably more so reflects your favorite YouTuber in general and not specific to banlist reactions, but was still fun to ask regardless. So tied for 5th were Simo and MST TV with 8 votes each. Simo recently posted his banlist reaction despite being on his honeymoon, so that was enjoyable to watch. MST TV not only does reactions but also makes great banlist damage report videos which are very informative. Next we have the DB Grinder, which is funny because I don't think he actually posts banlist reactions, at least not on YouTube. So this kind of goes back to what I said earlier about people responding about their favorite YouTuber in general, but nonetheless still a positive sign for DB Grinder. At 3rd we have Joshua Schmidt, who is more of a newer person on YouTube scene but has been growing at a very quick rate and provides really informative content for competitive play, which I suppose isn't too surprising since he is one of the best players in Europe. Then at close number 2 is Farfa, who of course is one of the funniest YouTubers out there and provides some fun reactions to watch. Too bad the list did not come out during his recent subathon, but at least it's finally out now. And finally, at number 1 is once again MBT Yu-Gi-Oh! Has been growing even more lately and recently hit that 100k subscriber mark, so a big congrats to Joseph. Really provides a lot of insight in his videos like his 10-minute testing, but also brings a lot of humor into his videos, which I'm sure is a big reason for his continued growth. Alright guys, so this video took me quite a while to make, so hopefully you enjoyed that. If you did, it would mean a lot if you could share the video to your fellow Yu-Gi-Oh! Friends, and if this video does well, then I can continue doing these surveys after each ban list. As usual, a big thanks to my Patreons, Eileen Dice Queen, Bolt Spider, Cybernetic, Brandon Jaren, Bearlord, Spooky Boogie, and Stephen Phillips as always for supporting the channel. You guys are awesome. If you're interested in joining my Patreon, links down below. Take care guys.